Black exceptionalism and Black excellence is not going to save us. Black people deserve to be regular. We deserve the right to be mediocre. Everyone doesn't have to strive for the top. And if you honestly believe in capitalism, you need the mediocre. We're going to talk about the very, very viral moment that happened on Eboni K. Williams. Eboni has a show with the Griot, and she called in Iyanla Vanzant to interview her based on a comment that Iyanla had made on The Breakfast Club.
My experience and my observation is that most women are men in skirts.
So we have Eboni, who has a show, calls Iyanla. In the interview with Iyanla and Eboni, Iyanla asks a question about would Eboni date a bus driver. That clip goes viral. And then Eboni ends up on The Breakfast Club. And she also does a response to the virality of the soundbite from her interview with Iyanla. And I think overall, Iyanla Vanzant is a troll who makes for great television. The ethics of what she does are questionable at best. But Iyanla knows what she's doing. And I think at this point, the conversation is deeply unproductive. Capitalism is not a mode of liberation. And it is unfortunate that we then now have to peddle in this deeply unproductive conversation about dating preferences, about the socioeconomics of dating for Black women as millennial Black women in 2023, and attempting to place systemic issues within the canon of how we partner being a solvent to, oppressive systems. It don't work like that, all right?
Would you date a bus driver? Would you date
if
a bus
he owns
driver?
the bus? If he owns it. If he owns the bus.
See, that's a problem. That's a problem. That's a problem.
Okay. Eboni knew what she was doing when she called up Iyanla, who was on The Breakfast Club, as I stated, and made a comment about women are being trained to be men in skirts. And Eboni didn't disagree with the sentiment. She actually thought it was interesting. And in this interview here on The Griot, she starts off by claiming that she felt like sort of called out, in essence, from that commentary, because she relates to Iyanla as they're both trained as lawyers. And Eboni has been told on dates, you're not arbitrating. You're not in the courtroom right now. Like you can let go some of whatever you're holding on to right now. And honestly, the whole interview here, Iyanla is just giving sound bites. The interview at large really lacks any sort of coherency because there's no interrogation of like, what the hell do you mean about Black women being trained to be men in skirts when you yourself, Iyanla, in this interview are very proud that you sent your 9-year-old son out into the workforce. We get sound bites. We get moments that can be repackaged into 60-second Instagram posts that'll do well on TikTok, but in the whole context of this interview make absolutely no sense. Iyanla goes from claiming that Black women have been socialized and trained to accept less. We have lost our grace. If we have a crown, the crown is crooked. She was a horrible mother, but a great father because she didn't know how to nurture. Because fathers, masculine energy, I guess by her definition, does not have the capability of being nurturing. Iyanla claims she was a great father because she knew how to provide, protect, and those are masculine energies. Men build. Women create. Sounds great, is actually hella stupid. Build is external, creating is internal. Conjecture. Fidgetiness is masculine energy, apparently. Is masculinity the same as being a man? What is the need for a binary definition of feminine and masculine energy? How does that serve you? And who, to take it back to Hortense Spiller, who taught you that? Where did you get that language from? And yet your proudest moment raising your child is getting him a job at 9 years old because you want to make sure that he could be a man. Because to be a man is to be financially viable. So in the clip that I just played, Eboni clearly asked a very long, kind of silly question herself about how can women be in our divinity when the dating pool of men are not positioned to protect or provide because they're not earning the incomes or they lack resources. And honestly, that question, if we were actually having a conversation in earnest, right? If we were actually, holding things in contention, if we were really thinking about the way we engage in dating discourse and the popularity of these conversations around dating and partnering and what they're actually like obscuring, like what they're actually trying to get at, maybe we don't necessarily either don't have the language to discuss or the actual thing that we should be discussing is tiring. It's exhausting. And so it's much easier, it's much funner, it's much more lighthearted to talk about, inflation and poverty and lack of resources across silos, but to talk about that in the frame of dating and partnering. It's much easier to say, I don't have, or a much more fun conversation to have about men are trash and they're all broke and they're dusties, rather than to say, mass incarceration has done a number on the Black community. And on top of mass incarceration, the breakdown of American public education and the lack of quality jobs that pay solid living wage. We do not have jobs that provide quality of life. And there's all these things that are shrinking my dating pool. No, it's not fun to talk about colonialism. People barely want to talk about patriarchy, and their knee-jerk reaction is just to be like, oh, you learned a new buzzword. That's all you would ever talk about. We could have those conversations, and honestly, we should be having those conversations. But it is much easier, it's much more enjoyable, and it's much more engaging to talk about niggas ain't shit, niggas is broke, how am I supposed to date, okay? And so Iyanla's response to men cannot protect and provide, which you just defined as necessary masculine energy, what you just defined as what Black women need to like back away from doing, because we are being trained to be men in skirts. We are socialized and trained to accept less. So if I'm not to accept less, what am I to do in a dating pool that only offers less? Would you date a bus driver? Is Iyanla's response. This is a troll. You was just going for a soundbite. Iyanla knew what her job was on the griot. She did it. She will absolutely be invited back because she gets the engagement going. People have preferences. And I think we get in trouble because we want to try to broadcast these preferences. There's no way to give dating advice without peddling in classism. When you start taking your personal preferences and how you maneuver, and largely for most of us, this is not even a Black woman thing. We are all trying to survive. And dating in today's society, you are trying to survive. You are searching for romance, for compassion, for love, which you need to survive. And when we take those personal preferences that are shaped based upon our material reality, the day-to-day things that we deal with, where we come from, where we're trying to go, how we've been socialized, our cultural backgrounds, our education, our access, and we try to turn them into answers to systemic issues, we so quickly trip into classism. Because then you got to admit what you would never do or how you've done things. It's not productive. I think the point of having these conversations about dating and partnering and niggas being broke in that light is largely consistently good engagement. You are doing these discussions because people will watch and it makes you money. It's a profitable conversation to have. That's exactly what it is. I don't think there's any good dating advice. I don't think there's any solid dating advice outside of advising people on how to build community and deciding what you want your community to look like, and then building the life where you can engage in the risk of dating. But there's no universal dating advice that's going to be good for everyone because there is so much nuance. What we can do is create sound bites that speak to a particular audience that we want to speak to and get their engagement and make money off the conversation. But we are literally not moving the needle on anything.
That I am actually speaking and pouring into the ascension of Black men when I said what I said. Now, I suspect that some of y'all are the same men that were bringing home C's and D's on your report cards, only to then be coddled by parents that said, well, that's okay, as long as you're doing your best. Well, listen, I love and believe in the excellence of black men. So no, my dear, C's and D's or any other form of mediocrity is not okay.
There's academic research. These are conversations that are already happening in the pop culture sense around like black exceptionalism and black excellence is not going to save us. And that black people deserve to be regular. We deserve the right to be mediocre. Everyone doesn't have to strive for the top. And if you honestly believe in capitalism, you need the mediocre. If you believe in your right to private wealth, you need the everyday person. You need the person that wants to be the means and not own the means, and who's content with that life. How do you not respect that? How is your response to Iyanla? And I mean, we get it, right? Because Eboni understands TV. And Eboni understands the necessity of keeping Iyanla in her good graces and someone who she can bring back on the show. Because the interview was so incoherent. And Eboni just went along with it. Your response to Iyanla trolling and creating great sound bites, and one soundbite going viral, and then people talking about the classism that is baked into how we discuss dating. I guess you got to do a response, but then to frame black excellence as liberation, like double down in the classism, I just don't understand. Capitalism ruins everything around us, including the dating pool. And this is what happens when we keep trying to engage in dating conversations as though intimate partnerships are a solution to poverty, to inflation, to outside being too damn expensive. And these conversations are never about actually moving the needle forward, actually keeping the various sub-communities within the black community safe, whether that's children, black women, queer, trans people, non-binaries, like removing the violence that exists simply because of how we identify, the way we are engaged violently, keeping people safe, keeping people who are simply trying to pursue a soft place to land, to pursue love, care, and compassion, that I would like people to pursue those ideals in a safe way. This is never about setting up communities of safety and compassion. It is always a conversation held to do numbers. And that's why I'm so blown. That's why I'm just like, this shit is stupid 50 million ways. Come on over to the Patreon, patreon.com/Jouelzy. It's where I do all my live streaming.